In this video, I am going to look at a game I played on Tuesday a week ago in a Sussex League match for Horsham 1 against Bexhill 1. The match was played at Horsham. I was on board 3. I had the black pieces and was up against Bill Tracey. My opponent started with e4 and I responded with c5, the Sicilian defence. White now opted for the Grand Prix attack, which is based on the move f4. He started with knight c3, preventing an immediate d5 in response to f4. f4 at once is met by d5, e takes d5, knight f6, a strong pawn sacrifice. After knight c3, play went knight c6, f4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop b5. White hopes to play bishop takes c6, compromising black's pawn structure. Bishop c4 is the main alternative, which is met by e6, blunting the bishop. After bishop b5, play went knight d4. This is the best response, exploiting the position of the knight on c3. Now, White played knight takes d4. But after this, the bishop on b5 is exposed, as the game demonstrates. Castles is better, although black is still doing fine here. After knight takes d4, black naturally recaptured with c takes d4, rather than bishop takes d4, as this causes white the maximum difficulties, as it exposes the problem with an early c3 by white. In this kind of scenario, the knight is under attack and has to move. So, play went knight e2, knight h6. This is the simplest way for black to complete his development. The knight is actually not badly placed in h6. Now, white had been moving quickly up to this point, but now he had a little bit of a think. And I actually wondered at this point whether he would play the blunder d3, which falls foul of queen a5 check, winning a piece. However, instead of d3, he played knight g3, so I assumed that he had seen the problem with d3 and wasn't intending to play it. Now, incidentally, as an illustration of the problems with having a bishop on b5, let's consider the move castles instead of knight g3. This is what white has most often tried. After castles d3, d5, white now has to be careful about the bishop on b5. For instance, king h1 is a serious error because of queen a5. When black traps the bishop on b5, white can wiggle a bit but not escape. a4, a6, rook a3, bishop g4, and black is just winning here. Instead of king h1, white should play bishop a4 when black can play the tricky b5. Now, bishop takes b5 is an error because of queen b6, when black creates the double threat of queen takes b5 and d takes e4. After bishop a4, d takes e4, black wins material because of d takes e4, d3 check. So instead of bishop takes b5, white should play bishop b3. But after d takes e4, d takes e4, a5, a4, queen b6, black intends d3, and if white plays king h1, then knight g4 leaves black with a clear advantage. He intends to play the knight to e3. So that's an example of white's difficulties in this position. Now, instead of castles, as I said, white played knight g3 and black just castled. And in this situation, white really has to play something like bishop e2 to get his bishop out of danger, but instead he played d3. And I thought he wasn't going to play this because I assumed that as he didn't play it on the previous move, he saw what the problem was, but evidently not. And so I played queen a5 check, winning a piece, and I thought at this point he might actually resign, but as he had travelled so far to the match up from Bexhill, and this was a team event, he evidently decided to continue and try to make a fight of it. Unfortunately, there weren't really any resources in his position to allow him to do this. Play went bishop d2, queen takes b5. Black is now threatening the pawn on b2, so white played b3. Black broke actively in the centre with d5. White tried prodding the queen with a4, but black had the comfortable reply queen c6, both defending the pawn on d5 and also putting pressure on c2, which rather constricted white. Now, white tried to keep the position closed with e5, but black had the standard f6 in response, and white now had to take on f6 because otherwise he would probably just lose a pawn. E takes f6, e takes f6, but now black was threatening rook e8 check, so white had to castle. Now black developed actively with bishop g4, and because white had to keep c2 defended, he had to move his queen to a passive square. He decided on queen b1. Black now played knight f5, looking to swap knights because the knight on h6 wasn't particularly active, and in any case, as he's a piece up, this is the standard approach to take. After knight takes f5, bishop takes f5, white decided to try to go after black's pawn on d4 with queen b2, but this doesn't really achieve anything, because even if white was able to win the pawn on d4 for nothing, black would still be a piece up. Anyway, black played rook on f to e8. There was no need to try to defend the pawn at the moment, and white rejected queen takes d4, presumably because of queen takes c2, and white is obviously in terrible trouble here. So rather than queen takes d4, white played rook on a to c1, defending c2, and therefore intending to follow up with queen takes d4, although even that isn't terribly good, as we shall see. Black played the active rook e2, bringing his rook to the 7th rank and hitting the white bishop at d2. White decided that he had to get rid of this rook while defending the bishop on d2 by playing rook f2, but black was just happy to swap a pair of rooks. As noted previously, he is a piece up, so exchanges on the whole tend to favour the side a piece ahead. And after rook takes f2, king takes f2, played rook e8, intending to play bishop g4 followed by rook e2 check. Now, white decided to grab the pawn on d4. And here, black could have exchanged queens with queen b6. And admittedly, after queen takes b6, a takes b6, black should be winning. Although he was a little concerned about bishop e3, although after rook c8, bishop takes b6 can be met by bishop takes d3, and this would have been winning. for black, although play would have gone on for a while, no doubt. Anyway, rather than playing queen b6 to swap queens, black saw no reason to head for an endgame, believing quite reasonably that he could settle matters in the middle game. And so he played bishop g4, intending rook e2 check. White played rook e1. Black swapped rooks. And now White had an unenviable choice of captures. Bishop takes e1 would have been met by queen takes c2 check. And White could have tried to complicate matters with king g3, but then black simply has queen e2. And actually, although White can play queen takes d5 check, after bishop e6, things will soon be resolved in black's favour. For instance, queen takes b7 is met by queen takes e1 check, and queen d8 check is met by bishop f4, 8 rather, and if bishop b4, apparently winning the bishop on f8, indeed threatening queen takes f8 mate, black has queen e3 check, king h4, queen takes f4 check, g4, queen takes h2 mate. So bishop takes e1 wouldn't have worked. Instead of bishop takes e1, White therefore tried king takes e1, but this wasn't really any better. Black played queen e6 check, and after bishop e3, f5. Now, White was able to grab the a7 pawn, queen takes a7, but black now had a forcing sequence which decided matters very quickly in his favour. Bishop c3 check, king f2, d4. Now, the line that black spent a little time calculating was queen b8 check, and after king g7, queen e5 check doesn't work because of queen takes e5, f takes e5, d takes e3 check, and black is 2 pieces up in the endgame. That's obviously winning. And instead of queen e5 check, White could have played queen takes b7 check, but after king h6, White has no more checks, and if he retreats the bishop on e3 to safety with bishop c1, black can just play queen e1 mate. As it happened though in the game, rather than queen b8 check, White just played bishop takes d4, but this allowed the immediate queen e1 checkmate.